Okay, so this is my tub of plaster of Paris, and I'm going to take this down. I've got my cup and my spoon down by the creek. So I'm going to take this down there and mix just a little bit up. It's really important when you're outside in nature to leave the area cleaner than you found it. Okay, so I'm going to put a couple of spoonfuls, heaping spoonfuls in here. We'll go with 3. And then it just takes a little bit of water to mix in with the plaster of Paris. You want to go a little bit at a time. This can get a little bit messy, but you're outside, so that's okay. We're getting there. Oh, I'm splashing this everywhere. Now you will find some directions for making plaster casts of animal tracks where they want you to put a ring around the track, or a milk carton cut in half. But we have found, my family has, that this works just as well. We just put it right in there. And we'll let that set. Okay, and I'm going to go do the same thing to the great heron track, and then we'll come back and check on these. Okay, can you see how that's a consistency of a really, really thick, almost like a cheddar cheese, nacho cheese consistency. And you've got to keep stirring it until you're ready to pour it, or it will harden right in that cup. So I'm going to go pour this on another track I just found. This one is not quite ready. It takes a little bit to set up. It'll start getting warm. Oh, it's getting hard. I need to go pour this on a track, and I'll be right back. So it's been about 20 minutes now since I poured this first one, and it was the fawn track. It was deeper than the great blue heron track, so because of that, it took more plaster of Paris to fill the track, and that means it's going to take longer to set up. And why do I keep touching the top of it? When plaster of Paris starts to set and it's about ready, it will feel warm to the touch. When it's warm to the touch, then it's time to pick it. You can get it picked up. Right now, if I tried to pick that up, it would be like picking up white mud, and it would ruin the track. So I'm going to let it set a little while longer. Patience. Another factor you want to keep in mind when considering drying time is that the wetter the sand, you can see how close this one is to the water's edge. The wetter the sand, the longer it's going to take. And you can see the deer tracks, they are pretty far from the water's edge. Those two are the deer tracks. So in comparison to the great blue heron, they are much farther from the water's edge, and the sand was enough to make a print, but the sand wasn't soaked. So we'll see how that affects the great blue heron track when it is dry enough to pick up. While we're waiting on the plaster tracks to harden, let's take a look at this activity in the Vermilion County 4-H Discover the River, an aquatic science project. This project is called Discover the River because in the Wabash Valley, most creeks feed into the Wabash River. That is the state river of Indiana. And Vermilion County, Indiana, has more miles of shoreline of the Wabash River than any other county. All right, so let's look at some of the tracks that we might find. Here we have the beaver. And you can see the beaver's walking pattern. They don't walk a straight line, it doesn't look like. And the duck, here's three birds. The duck, the great blue heron, and the wild turkey. And the track that I made a plaster cast of, it had that back part there. And that's how I knew that that was a great blue heron track and didn't belong to a wild turkey or a duck. It looked just like that. Hopefully that track will be done fairly soon and we can take a look at it. Here we have the river otter and the eastern chipmunk. Those are tiny little prints. The squirrel, or the ground squirrel, and also the eastern fox squirrel. The eastern gray squirrel, and the eastern cottontail rabbit. And one reason why it's, if you have a place where there's a muddy area that leads to a creek or a water source or a sandbar along a very shallow creek, all animals need to get a drink of water. No form of life can survive without water. So they all have to come to the water source to get a drink at some point. There's the muskrat and possum. And the skunk and the woodchuck. That's also known as a groundhog. There's the raccoon. His front foot and his hind foot, do you see how they're different? When you see these tracks on this paper, the H stands for hind and the F stands for front. And the badger. Okay, I'm going to very carefully work the spoon under and get this up. Okay, you gotta be very, very, very careful. Okay. Perfect. Now there is some sand on that, but you can see where the toes of the great blue heron are, and there's that back ridge. Remember, this is really damp right here because it's right at the water's edge, because that great blue heron was probably going for dinner on some of these fish I've been watching for the last 45 minutes. So what you'll want to do is put these on newspaper or paper towels in the kitchen, somewhere out of the way where they're not going to get bumped, because they are still very, very fragile. And they'll need to dry completely, and then you can brush that sand off with a stiff paintbrush or maybe even a Q-tip, but you have to be very, very gentle because they are fragile. Now I'm going to go down and see if we can get up that other deer track. Okay, so I've brought my other tracks down here, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did with those two. You see how easily that popped up? There, and it's a fawn track. See how small it is? A real deer track is going to be much, much deeper into the sand or the mud. It's going to be much, much deeper and much larger. An adult deer track is going to be, oh, probably twice as long at least. So again, this is very fragile. And once that sand, you see that back part just broke off there. That's okay, I still have the track. So that's nothing to get upset about because we still have a good track there. Okay, so I'll let those dry and then we'll take a brush to them and you'll see what they look like all cleaned up. That's all from the creek. And just for fun, because I already had some plaster mixed up, I did 4H. And when I did that, I had to write the 4 backwards because it's going to be reversed when you pick it up. So if you're going to do something like that where it matters which direction the letter or the number goes, you need to think about it and write it backwards. But there's our 4-H in plaster. Okay, I have my tracks on the newspaper back up at the house. They are out of the way, not in the middle of a room on the floor. They are out of the way, out of the line of traffic. And I did leave my boots outside, so I'm not tracking anything in. So we'll let the sand dry a little bit, and then we'll come back with a brush and gently brush it away. Okay, we are going to start with the great blue heron track. And I'm using an old toothbrush. This is one that I keep on hand for tasks just like this, and I don't keep it in the bathroom anywhere close. You see, I'm brushing very gently so I don't disturb. You see the sand falling off? Just very ever so gentle. See the track coming to life. Something else that can make this fun is add just a few drops of food coloring to the plaster of Paris right before you pour it. That makes it a little more fun too. And remember that you want the plaster of Paris to be about the consistency of nacho cheese. Nacho cheese. Okay, so we'll do one of the deer tracks. I like this one. This one, a little bit of it broke off down there at the creek, but I like this one because it's really pretty cool. It's very even. You can see. And again, this would be a fawn, a young deer. This is a small track for a deer. And the longer you let these set and dry, the more that sand is going to brush right off. You just have to be very gentle. Okay. We'll try the number 4. I think I'll let these dry a little bit longer. Okay, so after about an hour of drying and some work with a toothbrush, there are the 2 deer tracks on the left. The great blue heron track, you can still see all 3 of its toes, and then, or 4, but the one goes to the back. And then the 4-H. I like how the one deer track turned out to be like a heart. And we love 4-H. This is a fun activity for all ages, and once again, you do not have to have a creek. You will be amazed at what kinds of tracks you will find in your own backyard. Have fun!